I think of the amount.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the MPO meeting of Southern New Hampshire Planning Organization. Sylvia, what I'll do up front is the usual routine is the roll call and the action of minutes.
So move.
Could I have a motion to accept the minutes?
So move.
And is there a second?
Yes.
Any corrections or omissions on the action on the minutes of May 24th? Not seeing anyone want to make changes. Sylvia, do you want to do a?
Yes. All right. I don't believe, unless Paula came in and I didn't see her. Nope.
No, Paula is actually excused today.
Okay, thank you. So we'll start with Bedford. We have Charlie Fairman.
I hear and abstain.
Thanks, Charlie. Bill Jean,
Present and yes.
and virtually Barbara Salvatore. If you could unmute yourself and, yeah, and just to remind everyone online, we mute you when you get there, so you've got to do it. Thanks, Barbara. Got a thumbs up. Candia, we have Al Hall.
Yes, and present.
Thank you, Al. Chester, we have Andrew Haddock in the room,
Present, yes.
and Deb Munson. Yes. We don't have a representative from Deerfield, from Derry. I thought I saw Jeff Moulton. Did I?
I'm here and accept the minutes.
Thank you, Jeff. We have Richard Tripp in the room.
Present and yes.
From Francistown, we have Alfred Eisenberg virtually.
Here and yes.
Thanks, Alfred. And Linda Kuhnhart's in the room.
Present and yes.
Thanks, Linda. And our newest member, Gary Schneckenberg. I hope I said that right, Gary.
Good job. Good job. Present and abstain.
Thank you. Goffstown, we have Barbara Griffin in the room. Hello, Barbara.
Yay.
Hello.
Finally remembered where you are.
I abstain. Thank you, Barbara. David Pierce is in the room,
Yes, approved the minutes.
and also Jacob LaFontaine is virtual.
Present and yes.
Thanks, Jacob. From Hooksett, we have Denise Pitchett Folk.
Present, abstain.
Thanks, Denise. We have from Londonderry, virtual Deborah Levens,
Present and yes.
Arthur Rugg.
I'm present and yes.
Thanks, Art. Martin Strugus.
Present and yes.
Thanks, Martin. We have Lynn Wiles as well online.
Yes, I'm present and I approve.
Thank you. Manchester, we have Peter Capano,
Yes, and abstain.
Ray Clement,
Here, yes.
virtually Dan O'Neill. Hi, Dan.
Aye, yes, and abstain.
Thanks, Dan. And let's see, Londonderry. Don Waldron.
I'm present and abstain.
Thank you, Don. From New Boston, right behind me, Mark Sunan.
Here and yes.
Thanks, Mark. I don't believe we have anyone from Ware either today. And from Wyndham, we have Peter Griffin
Present and yes.
and Edgar Lapointe.
Present and abstain.
Did I miss anyone from the community? I say I get a gold star for that. From MPO, we have William Rose.
Yep, present and approved.
Thank you. And as guest, Wendy Johnson.
Present.
Thank you. Let's see, a variety of non-voting members. Let's see, we have our guests from DES. We'll introduce them later, and Craig Tufts from Central.
Hello, everyone.
Hi. And I believe that's it for me for this meeting.
Okay, Sylvia, thank you so much. In the past couple of months, we have lost two very important people that were important to Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. We lost Bill Herman, but even more recently, we lost Bill DUSCHATKO, who was very involved with the commission, but it was a pillar of Bedford Public Service. I would like to offer anyone that would like to make comments on Bill DUSCHATKO. Please, now is your chance. Yes, please go right ahead.
Thank you. I got my mouthful. Bill was a critical member of Bedford's volunteers, served on many boards over the years, most recently, of course, member of town council and the town council representative to the planning board. Like most of our towns, Bedford depends on volunteers to run the town. He was a critical cog in that for many years, and will be missed greatly. Thank you very much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman.
Is there anyone else that would like to comment? Barbara?
Thank you, Peter. I thought Bill was a terrific volunteer. He was a member that when there was a study or any sort of results of a survey published, he actually would go and look at the study and survey to see the details. And he was personally one of my favorites, because usually when I was cutting something, he supported me and agreed to cut it. So it was always fun. He always knew what he was talking about. You didn't have to doubt whether he was just making a summary statement. He always had a basis, and it is a huge loss for this group because he was a big supporter of it, and it's a big loss for them.
Anyone else? Yes, Peter.
Thank you. I wasn't able to make last month's meeting, and not only Bill DUSCHATKO, but Bill Herman, two really smart, dedicated, great men who I learned a lot from being here for as many years as they were with me. And yeah, this is nice to recognize them. They certainly will be missed.
Thank you so much. From a personal point, they both became great friends. We would sit after the meetings, and just the institutional knowledge that both of them had, not only relating to their own communities, but the history of politics in New Hampshire. Just listening to some of the comments and the stories that they would tell it was amazing. With that stated, well, let's have a moment of silence for Bill DUSCHATKO. Thank you. Is there any old business? Is that a no?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We're good to go.
Okay. Let's move on to new business, the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission Fiscal 21-24 Transportation Improvement Program Amendment 4. Nate.
Thank you very much, Peter. The highlight of our program is me trying to figure out, even though I've done this now for a year plus, a year and a half, trying to figure out how to effectively share my screen. All right. Can everybody virtually see this presentation in full screen mode, not the reading preview mode that this computer sometimes likes to default to, but full screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, very good. All right. I think we have a success here. So we're going to just tackle and dive into tip amendment number 4. It's the first item on our agenda. Just as a reminder, New Hampshire Department of Transportation has requested that we, the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission, amend our fiscal year 21 to 24 TIP to accommodate a series of project additions and removals and funding cost adjustments and scope changes. We walked through all of the projects in TIP amendment number 4 in detail at our meeting last month. So on May 24th, I walked through all of the projects. We released, that was kind of a sneak preview of all the projects that would be in TIP amendment number 4 back in May. We released TIP amendment number 4 on June 6th, 2022 for a 10-day public comment period. And our TAC, what we call our TAC, our Technical Advisory Committee, did review and recommend adoption of tip amendment number 4 at their meeting earlier this month. So today is the public hearing to consider adoption of tip amendment number 4. I would note that during the public comment period, one comment was received, and that comment came in from our colleagues at New Hampshire DOT. So the Department of Transportation did submit a request to us that the following project change be added to tip amendment number 4. And that project change relates to a project in Londonderry for improvements at the intersection of Route 28 and Stonehenge Road. And the proposed amendment is to add $66,000 of engineering phase funding to federal fiscal year 22. New Hampshire DOT has confirmed that this funding is available and will not affect the fiscal constraint of the tip. And the reason for this amendment is that additional funding is needed to continue the alternatives analysis that's ongoing for that project, complete the required NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, so environmental documentation, and refine the right-of-way layout for the project. Our Technical Advisory Committee did review this comment that came in from New Hampshire DOT and does recommend, as do we at the staff level, that this change be included in tip amendment number 4 as requested by the New Hampshire DOT. I am happy to walk through if anybody would like, I know that we walked through all of the projects last month. I'm happy to give another recap of the project changes in tip amendment 4 if that is desirable. Otherwise, if nobody wishes us to walk through the project changes, I would give the floor back to you, Mr. Chairman, for public comments.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Nate in the room? Yes, Barbara.
I just have a question on the funding for the proposed amendment. How did we just sort of, are we going to be able to all of a sudden get funding available for expansion of other projects? How did that happen?
Yeah, so this, I left my hard copy of tip amendment number 4 here. There is the Londonderry project is actually in an area that is eligible for a certain type of funding called Surface Transportation Block Grant over 200,000 areas funding. So it's in a part of the state that's in an area that's over 200,000 population, and there's a specific federal funding source that funds projects in that area. So the Department of Transportation has confirmed that based on their anticipated revenues from the federal level for that particular program, that the funding is available to make this change, and so we address it accordingly. I don't know in terms of other projects. I know the department is continuing to go through a process for what is coming in through the new Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and they are programming a substantial amount of that funding at the state level for various pavement rehabilitation and bridge rehabilitation projects, and so that process is continuing. But at least for this particular request in Londonderry, DOT has confirmed that that particular source of funding is available, and there is $66,000 to add to that project.
Yes, please.
Does that mean the amount we had budgeted for this was inadequate?
The amount that, yeah, I mean, sometimes as DOT gets into a project and they get into the engineering phase, latent conditions arise. In this case, the pandemic slowed some things down on the NEPA process. So part of what we do with these amendments is sometimes we need to add supplemental funding to projects to account for that. This just happens to be one of those cases.
Thank you.
Does anyone else within the room have a question? Yes, please.
I have a question, and once again, I'm not even a member of this, but I'm just a citizen. And I happen to be from Londonderry, but as part of this, let me ask a question. This that is being approved and is moving on, did it also include exit 4A?
Yeah, so good question. So we didn't walk through all the project changes because we did that in May, but let me just highlight what is exit 4A related in this.
While
tip
Nate's,
amendment number 4.
while Nate's setting that up, Ray, why don't you, for the minutes, could you tell us your full name? So for the.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, Ray Breslin, 3 Gary Drive, Londonderry, New Hampshire.
Thanks, Ray.
So there are two exit 4A related changes in tip amendment number 4. They relate to 2 of the projects. There are, I think now, either 5 or 6 projects that are the exit 4A project because it's been broken up into different pieces. The 2 changes in tip amendment number 4 are as follows. So there's a project called 13065A that is described as preliminary design, final design, right-of-way, and construction of the new interchange. This actually, the proposed amendment here is to take the construction funding out of this project, as the construction funding will now be living in a series of sub-projects, the biggest of which is project 13065A, which isn't included with any changes in tip amendment number 4. So taking the construction funding out of this 13065 project, and that will be split into what we call child projects or sub-projects. There are 13065A, 13065B, and 13065E. So that is one of the changes that's proposed in tip amendment number 4 related to exit 4A. The other change is to add one of those new sub-projects in. And that is what's called the this 13065E project is going to be one of those new sub-projects of exit 4A. And this project happens to be specific to building demolitions on Folsom Road. So this would be an addition of that sub-project into the tip for that element of the exit 4A. So that's those are the changes related to exit 4A in the tip. Is simply related to the removal of construction funding in the 13065 project and the addition of this 13065E project specific to building demolitions on Folsom Road.
Can I say more? I don't want to hold up the deal.
Well, that's my concern because I haven't even recognized the people that are calling in from the outside yet.
Well, okay. Okay, I mean.
You know what I would like to suggest you do is, I know you've expressed an interest. And had you thought of writing written comments and sending them to Sylvia or Nate about the project?
I certainly will do that, but it's important that this be shared with others. So I'll gladly write my comments, but it's important that other people listen to this too. I mean, with all due respect, and let me be as brief as possible here. There's been a lot of changes, and the cost has continued to escalate. It's broken down into 3 sections now, and they haven't even acquired all of the property. And there's so much more to this. And just briefly, this is the point. The money that we spent, the DOT and the state spends taxpayer money, needs to be spent on the most important thing, okay? Now, look, I'm from Londonderry, and I'm talking maybe against this, but it doesn't matter. We need to take care of the roads and bridges, job 1, okay? These other projects may be nice ideas. Maybe it's going to boost the economy. Maybe it's going to give jobs. All well and good, but it's not a priority.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Is there anyone calling in would like to ask Nate questions? Okay, unless there are,
Mr.
Chairman.
yes,
I would like to move adoption of tip amendment number 4 as presented.
and that would be as amended, is that
As
correct,
amended.
Nate?
As amended.
Nate?
What's that? I'm sorry. I hid the floating meeting controls and now I can't find them.
No, that's okay. There was a motion made by Al to approve the the amendment, I'm sorry, number 4 as amended, because you did add a change to it. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
We would request a motion to approve that includes the inclusion of this Londonderry project.
Okay. Is there a second on that, please?
Before you take a vote, I'm wondering, can we get out of this? And then, so
Try to
that,
get out of it.
so that we can see at least visually too, if there were any questions. Ollie.
Doing good, Nate.
Well, where is that?
This is not my
Where is
area.
where is that bar?
The bar disappeared.
Another little. blue.
Let me see if James is available.
Yeah. What about that blue box from there? Or the one to the right?
Unmute themselves and let us know about that. Help is on the way.
Trying to get. How do you get the floating meeting controls back?
Are you still sharing your screen?
I think so.
We couldn't find the control.
Because you stop sharing your screen. So if you click on the Zoom, the actual Zoom icon down here. Click on that. Oh, it only brings that up. You should be able to stop sharing your screen and then share it again. It should bring all that back up.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Mhm. James is just a master of things, delivering pizza and technology and planning.
Yeah, but as soon as you become a master, they change.
There's an easy way to unhide them. It's just I don't think.
This is a good one. I don't know.
Okay.
Is it possible that it's on the other monitor?
No, we didn't. I suppose that's one way you could do it is change the monitor settings so you can see.
Just, Tammy, do you have co-host controls?
Yes, I do.
Can you stop sharing his screen?
Yeah, you can do that by sharing your own screen, I think.
Oh, there we go.
Hey, all right, great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, I am never gonna hide the share screen thing, never.
So those of you online, you can't see any presentation anymore. You can see the room. Am I correct?
Correct.
All right, I think we're back. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry for the technical difficulties. I have never
Encountered.
never been a Zoom expert.
We've had a motion and a second for approval. Nate, do you want a roll call or a simple raising of hands
I
is
noticed
sufficient?
2 items in chat.
Could you look at the chat real quick?
Let's see, 2 items in the chat.
I think one was about the,
Yeah.
We're all
just-
set.
Yeah, well, I think we're all set.
Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Virtually calling in, can you raise your hand?
thank you, that's helpful. Or a thumbs up icon works too. Thank you. Rob, could you let us know? I'm not sure who Rob is. Oh, Rob Curry from Hooksett. Hey,
Okay, although, any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay,
Gary is abstaining.
we have one abstention.
okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Sylvia, you're up next.
Oh, how exciting.
It is in the affirmative. fiscal 2025, 2034 10-year plan criteria and weighting.
So, did you already share this, Nate?
No, I have not shared anything, but
Oh,
don't hide the floating meeting.
All right, so share. In your plan. Okay, share. And that's not sharing.
I can see it on our screen, at least I can see the PowerPoint slide and it's non-slideshow format.
Okay. Great, wonderful. We will hopefully start from the beginning. That good now, James? Okay, great. All right, everybody. So I am honored because Nate has delegated this to me. It's transportation related and I get to do this, Barbara. Can you imagine? But I had
saved the fun for you.
That's right. She gets all the fun.
I think this was purposeful.
Well, I had practice. I already presented this to our TAC meeting. And mostly today, because we've been through this. We know that this 10-year, it sort of never ends, right? We're always talking about the 10-year plan. And but it's updated biannually. Try to move this again. And it's covering fiscal year 25 to 34. This is Nate's favorite diagram of all time. And for those of you who are new to the 10-year plan process, so let's first look at the left side of this figure. We see a fantastic arrow and it's from concept to construction. So if you look over, you'll see in these different boxes, the long-range transportation plan, the 10-year transportation improvement plan, which we're talking about today, and the transportation improvement program, which is what Nate just talked about. And you can see that the timeframes of planning ranges very long-term, as in the long-range transportation plan, to just a 4-year increment in the tip. The 10-year plan ranges, and you can see, I think that must be pretty old now. No, is that? But anyway, so you can see it's a 10-year plan, and it's a state requirement. It's a little different than the other two, which are federally required. This is a state requirement. All right. So something just to review once again is that we're allotted a certain amount of funding every 10-year plan cycle. And we're having, well, I'm not sure if there are really discussions at this point, but we have communicated to DOT. Once we were, we were informed about there might be some changes to the funding cycle because of the influx of funding from IIJA. And that there's a possibility, there's a possible scenario in which we might have an increase because the amount of money coming into the state. So we're still under discussion with that.
Question, have all of the planning commissions chimed in a similar fashion?
Good question. So what we did, this was a short time frame, and there are ongoing discussions with all of the regional planning commissions. But the 4 MPOs, which includes us, Stratford Regional Planning Commission, Nashua, and Rockingham Planning Commission, got together and put together a email. It went via email about our desire for the additional $10 million to be distributed amongst all regional planning commissions.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. So really today, it's about the criteria that we review all 10-year plan projects. Just as a review, All 9 regional planning commissions utilize the same set of 15 criteria to evaluate and prioritize projects for inclusion in the 10-year plan. They're weighted individually by each region, because you can imagine in some areas, safety might not be as important as road condition, or, there are so many different criteria. So we last adopted the criteria weightings in July of 2020, and today you all will do the same. And this is what you've seen in the past. And this has been arranged on the left-hand side by category, but with help of my staff. So what I wanted to do was really review this by the weight of each category. And since this is really difficult to see, let's take a little bit closer look. So on the left, we can see the different elements. So safety has 2 elements, and that's the highest priority, weighted at 17.25 as a total of these 2, both the safety performance and safety measures. There's network significance, which includes traffic volume and safety importance, and that ranks second. Mobility, both mobility need and performance, and mobility intervention, and you can see they're equally weighed at 7%. But somehow they're Nate, when he did this on his Excel spreadsheet, yeah, Tammy's taking care of all of that.
Oh, okay,
Yes,
great.
I delegated that to Tammy. So what's at 14.08, state of repair, you can see includes state of repair and maintenance. Economic development includes local and regional economic development and freight movement. Equity, environmental justice, and accessibility has 2 elements as well: equity, environmental justice, as well as accessibility. Natural hazard resiliency, hazard risk, and hazard mitigation, and lastly, support, which brings up the rest. So today what we want to do is decide, do you want to, the TAC at their last meeting decided we are going to keep all of these ratings the same as we did last time. They went through a rigorous process, and at TAC, they thought, you know what, that process was valid. These ratings look good. So they're going to leave it just like this. And again, to see it as a whole, this is how it looks. So this group will decide whether this makes sense or if you want to make a change. I'll give you also the timeline of all this. So the week of May 30th, 10-year plan solicitation and materials was sent out to all the communities, to multiple stakeholders in each community. So probably your town manager or administrator, public works folks. I'm imagining you all got copies. So there was many planners. It all depends on the stakeholders in their communities. Let's see, for, thanks, Tammy. Let's see, June 16th, that's when I reviewed this with TAC and they voted to support these criteria. We're here today, sitting as the MPO to review, and I have a blank here with the current criteria, whether you decide to approve it or change, and we'll determine that. Friday, July 29th is the submissions are due for community projects. They're due, and we're anticipating several projects. August through October is when those candidate projects undergo review by our SNHPC on-call engineer, who in this case is VHB, as in the last 2 rounds. November 11th, that short list of candidate projects is due. December 22nd through February 23rd, DOT reviews the candidate projects, and then the final list of priorities is in the end of March. So,
Can I see the list again, please?
yes, you can. And I know, Linda, you were involved
I
in
know, I
this.
wrote the one for 2020, I wasn't able to come to the last TAC meeting, so I keep thinking the hazard resiliency needs to move up. I'd like to bump up natural hazard resiliency above equity, environment, and justice and accessibility.
Let's go to that part so people can see the details. So we have hazard risk and analysis of the natural hazard risks, flood history to a transportation facility, hazard mitigation, a forward-looking analysis of how the natural hazard mitigation measures proposed as part of a project to reduce hazard risk. So,
So the reason for my suggestion is
Okay.
that with the current climate change and the current expectation that we're going to see more severe storms on a less predictable pattern, and the flooding that we've seen and the bridges that we've seen wiped out, my sense is even from 2 years ago, that's become a greater unknown than the known equitable, environmental justice, and accountability known changes that we want to make. So I don't say that the equity, I'm not saying that there's no value to the equity, environmental justice, and accessibility lying. I'm saying that I believe at this year going forward with the weather pattern changes and the potential for foreign stuff to happen to our road systems, that I would like to have that a higher importance. I'm not sure it needs to go to the top of the list, but I think it needs to come up off the bottom.
And we have another question. Go ahead.
Just in reference to those comments, I agree that it's changing weather pattern, and we've seen a lot of things in the show the last 5 to 10 years, which we haven't seen before. But counter that there is a large amount of FEMA hazard mitigation and response funding available to address those and to forecast and mitigate and make even road changes to prevent flooding and the loss of that transportation infrastructure. I think, and being from Manchester, we have a large parts of our city that have some serious equity and environmental justice concerns that are today. And that I think needs to be a priority today, right now, and there are really not other funding available except for what we have at the end of transportation criteria to be able to address some of those concerns.
okay, so we have 2 thoughts on the matter. Barbara,
Barbara.
Thank you. My issue, one of my comment on the 2 previous comments in regards to what's ranked currently 6 is that I just think the measurement of that is so subjective, other than just doing a location analysis, that I think keeping it on the lower ranking of analysis is appropriate.
which
think-
one, Barbara? I'm not sure.
that equity, environmental justice, and accessibility is really somewhat subjective as to the measurement. And I think when we do these things, it's easier to keep it the priorities for what is quantifiable to the extent you can. I would argue that state of repair, which is currently 4th, should really be 2nd. And this goes a little bit to the comment that we had from the public. The infrastructure and repair, I think, is a major priority. We have a lot of money coming into the state in regards to what may or may not be able to be done in the future. And looking down the road a few years when all of this money that we're getting is going to be gone. I mean, we're getting money now in our communities and locally that is in your window and it's gonna go away. I think putting the repair issues to 4th, given that we're talking about a 10-year planning process, is short-sighted and could end up with communities ending up having to deal with things that there would be more significant support for if we put it into this plan at a higher level. I'm trying to think of some of the projects that were in the plan this year that would have affected, and I can't. But it just seems to me as a regional planning commission dealing with transportation dollars, our priority should really be safety and what the condition of the roads are.
Bob, I agree with you on that, but conversely, I know Windham and I've talked to other communities are dealing with deferred maintenance issues now of roads and building maintenance that has not been done in a timely manner. Even though the money is coming in, isn't it also up to the communities to begin to rethink how we invest in our infrastructure?
Well, sure it is, but it's also, this also goes through the 10-year plan in the state, and what I'm saying is looking down the road, I think in a few years, you might see the ability of the state to provide resources changing dramatically, and your priority from a community standpoint is going to be, how do I get there? And I want to get there safe.
But Barbara, you have a closer watch on this being in the legislature than probably most all of us. Has the state even begun to think, okay, we'll come into the 10-year plan? After this 4-year cycle of federal funds is up, are they changing their perspective at all? Or are they just maintaining the pre-infrastructure funds?
Let me give you an example, and Representative Tripp, I'm sure, can add to some of this. We had a debate in the legislature over a state highway, which is currently part of all this, and at one point was in the 10-year plan in Merrimack for the new exit. What's the exit at the mall there? Somebody on the every turnpike, what's 10? 10. Continental Boulevard in Merrimack is currently maintained by the state. Merrimack has gotten a huge benefit from Continental Boulevard by virtue of all of the property that it opened up, for which it received significant property tax relief. However, if Continental Boulevard goes from the state to the community, Merrimack's road budget now goes up because it's a 4-lane highway, turns, and it becomes Merrimack's responsibility, their budget goes up. It was a very divided issue at the State House where it came out of committee with the recommendation that that road needs to go back to Merrimack, and it got overturned on the floor that the state still has it. And there's no particular maintenance or safety issue on that road, but I just see that as an example of where the state is ultimately trying to sort of deal with its highway infrastructure and repair it. And if we're not looking out on a regional community basis to make sure we're getting as much done for those kinds of big projects as we can, ultimately the communities are going to end up with it coming back to them. So, I mean, I could hear a lot more about the funding from that. I'm not on transportation, so I don't know the details of the funding, but that's just my concern. I just think safety is a big deal.
Okay, please.
Just 2 points. First, a question. The 10-year plan, is that inclusive of all funding sources? And specifically, my questions about the BIL money that's coming in for infrastructure repairs and bridge
I'm gonna look
repairs?
at Nate for that.
Yes,
Okay, so that money will be in these projects as well.
yes. I mean, we have a portion of the 10-year plan is a bigger process than just what we do. We have a portion of the 10-year plan process to ensure that local and regional project needs are reflected in the plan. So we kind of have the bottom-up portion of the 10-year plan process. DOT also programs a lot of statewide needs through their own, process as well that are reflected in the 10-year plan. So we have one component of that, but the entire 10-year plan encompasses everything that will be coming in through the IIJA or the bill, okay, whatever we want to call it.
And then just as far as equity and access being a subjective thing, I think not having that as an issue that you're dealing with may make it seem that there's a lot of subjectivity to it, but I think there's a lot of objectivity to it as well. And for example, in Manchester, the east side, there's a lot of low-income neighborhoods. There's the opportunity to put an alternative transportation network, being extending a existing rail trail path through those neighborhoods. And that is a very objective environmental and access and equity issue that would benefit those communities of low income throughout East Manchester to allow safe off-street transportation for pets and bicycles and adult transportation. So just an example that if you're not looking at it, it's not an issue in your community, it may seem subjective, but there actually are a lot of concrete objective benefits to that environmental and equity aspect.
Do I see the numbers for state of repair and percentages? It's just blocked by.
I know, but I don't want to.
Be careful about hiding the floating meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't print it out.
All right, so, here we go. State of repair at 8.34 and 4.20. While we're all talking here, does anyone online have any thoughts?
Quiet, okay.
Anyone else in the room have thoughts?
I do. Sylvia,
Andrew?
I agree with the comment that the state of repair should be moved up, but I also agree with the previous, the first four comments that the climate resiliency should be moved ahead of the environmental justice category.
Now, just so everyone knows, we need to add up to 100% at the end of the day. And we have people from DES waiting to talk about water. So does anyone, I see Dave has his pencil out. Anyone else looking at the numbers here that make some sense?
Yeah. Barbara Salvatore has a question.
Oh, Barbara Salvatore.
I just want to remind folks that we are an aging society. So when you're talking about some of the equity issues, it also directly impacts our ability in the next 10 years to be able to get around our communities.
Thank you, Barbara. Any other thoughts from
I have a question.
anyone, really?
When we reprioritize the 10-year plan criteria, say moving state of repair up to where safety is. Now, it's not a given that we're just going to switch weighting values, right?
You are all determining those, the weights now, today.
I understand that, but like right now, state of repair is at 12.53 and safety is at 17.25. If we were to switch the positions, the starting point would be for safety now 17.25, or it just
No,
it'd be whatever we decide.
whatever you decide. So if you decide, okay, so let's go back to the full list. So for example, if you add all these up, we know because Nate did it, it adds up to 100%. So if you say, okay, like Barbara said, this should be second, which means I'm gonna guess that.
How about I make a motion, Sylvia?
I'm
I like
ready.
it.
Okay,
I'll make a motion to swap the percentage allocations between state of repair and network significance.
Second.
There's a motion, there's a second. Any further questions? All those in favor, please.
I do have a question.
Yes, Peter.
Just to process wise here. Are we saying taking the two percentages that make up the network significance and putting them onto safety and vice versa? Is that what we're talking about?
No, I'm not changing safety. My motion recognizes, I am starting from the place that what staff has presented is the criteria as they existed the last plan. Staff has given for our consideration 1 through 8 in a particular order that matches it. I am proposing that before we get to a final motion on this, we swap state of repair, which is now 4th for 12.53, with network significance that is now 2nd at 16.85, so that the total percentage for the category is reversed so that the second category is now state of repair. The third would remain mobility, and the fourth would be network significance.
And what we could do to keep it simple is the existing relationship within
Percentage
that,
wise. stays the
percentage
same.
wise could be the same.
And Mr. Chair,
Peter?
that was my question. Are we gonna take the two sub percentages and apply them to the other categories?
Yeah, my proposal would be, it would be the same percentage of the new total. So 60,
Okay.
So it still would remain at 100%.
so it would still be the
The
100%.
words would move in order, but the percentages in the columns would stay in exactly the same position.
Well, no, I think
What I'm.
yes, it would end up, it would have to, the sub percentages would have to change because the totals change.
Would you want the sub percentages to be
The-
equal of,
The
equal?
same proportion that
half
they
of
are
the
now
ratio? Okay.
within the category.
The
proportions.
ratio would be the same
Ratio.
as it is now. So,
Okay, all right.
so you can't say
Got
these percentages would be the same because that wouldn't work.
With the
You would
ratio.
say, like, this is twice as this one, right? So it would be the same, only
Yep.
To the new number.
Okay.
To the
all right,
new
I
number.
understand. That's where I was going.
Yeah.
Very good.
I'll accept one last comment.
Maybe just a proposal question, as opposed to just a very simplistic swapping and taking something that the TAC and previous committees considered was number 4 and making number 2. We split the difference?
No.
Yeah.
No.
I don't think that amendment
There's a motion on the floor.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor.
Procedural,
I mean,
Sorry, John.
think about it. We can micromanage this for the whole rest of the meeting. Let's be reasonable. Yes,
Or
or,
we can kick it back to TAC and ask them, under these guidelines that we've discussed here, please come up with some new numbers, rather than trying to manipulate the numbers here on the spur of the moment. That would be my preference. I know that's not your motion.
Barbara, is the individual making the motion, is that something would be acceptable to you?
No.
Okay, fine.
I think we need to just go forward. I don't have any problem if TAC wants, if it goes back to TAC and they want to comment. But
Mhm.
I think the more we leave this open-ended for this group, the longer the discussion goes on.
We
Uh,
also have one hand raised online, Deb Levins.
Yes, please go right ahead.
Yeah, I was worried about our making a decision about those, separating those percentages, because the committee has figured out that one of them needs double the other one, I can't see with the pictures. But I think I would be more than happy if it went back to TAC to review those percentages, because I don't think we can make that decision very well today.
Well, Barb, but I mean, Deb, what we are talking about is we keep the same ratio. It would be, you see what I mean?
Oh, okay.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Let's take action on that. All those in favor of Barbara's motion, please raise your hand.
Hold on. Wait, I gotta expand this.
Bring in all 200.
You may need to do a roll call on this.
Yeah, Barbara, Sylvia, do you want to do a roll call, please?
All right, roll call. on
Good
this.
idea.
Charlie from Bedford,
No.
Bill, Bedford,
No.
Barbara from Bedford,
Yes.
Al from Candia,
No.
Chester, Andrew,
Yes.
Deb from Chester,
Yes.
Jeff from Derry,
No.
Richard from Derry,
Yes.
Francistown, Alfred,
He had to step out according to the chat.
thank you, Linda,
Yes.
Gary,
Yes.
Goffstown, Barbara,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Jacob,
Yes.
from Hooksett, we have Denise,
No.
Rob,
No.
Londonderry, Deb,
Yes.
Arthur, is Art there?
He's muted.
You're muted, Art.
Art, you're muted.
Thumbs up or thumbs down, Art?
He says yes in the chat.
Okay.
Thumbs up, okay. Thank you, Art. Martin,
Undecided.
okay. Lynn,
I vote yes.
thank you, Lynn. Manchester, Peter?
Yes.
Ray?
Yes.
Dan O'Neill?
Yes.
Don?
No.
New Boston?
Nay.
Peter?
Peter, me?
You?
Yes.
And Edgar?
Yes.
Where are you? Edgar.
What are the totals?
And we also have William Rose.
William is an abstention.
Thank you.
Sylvia, I'm here from Wyndham as well, John Hiltz.
Oh, John. What's your vote, John?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
Snuck in.
I believe the yes has the score.
Yeah, I think that's
Oh, and
correct.
Alfred just came too. Alfred, can you hear me? And we just took a vote on sort of swapping, let's see, Barbara. Swapping,
state of repair and network significance.
so what do you say, Alfred?
I had to step out for like 10, 15 minutes, so I didn't see that part. So can I abstain from that section?
Yes, and Martin, did you want to abstain or?
Yeah.
Okay,
So how are we, Barbara?
Okay,
I mean,
think-
Linda, excuse me.
I think I counted, I may have missed a couple people because it was happening. So I have 12 yes and 6 no.
Okay.
And then 2
17 and 8
abstentions.
with 3 abstentions.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So the motion passes.
the motion passes.
Okay, yes.
In our discussion, one of our members here this morning was concerned about resiliency being slightly lower than total equity.
Yes.
And is that still a concern? That
Still a concern, but it's awful hard to fight, and I don't really want to fight. I think it's unfortunate that emotions have precedence over safety and spending our transportation dollars on things that aren't going to keep bridges from falling. It's just how I think about things. I think it's equitable to know that when you drive across that metal bridge, that there's not girders that are all worn out, rather than how many bikes you can put on a bike path.
That's the reason.
There's Barbara was over here.
Barbara?
I'll just say that as to the point that I think David just made, Peter pointed out to me that the relative percentages in that particular case is 11.24 versus 11.71. So I think we all get these projects back at the end. Sometimes we move them around even then. So I appreciate the point that was made, but in the ranking, they're actually pretty close.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, we have an amended proposal to be voted on.
We just
We just
voted.
did.
But we voted to amend the proposal, not the proposal itself. Correct, Barbara?
I'm not sure. I don't know that we follow Mason's rules here, but that
I,
would be.
I did interpret as being that this proposal was amended and that was what we were voting on.
Okay, all right.
So we voted for the amendment, but now we have to vote for the whole, is what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, we have to vote for the whole. Do we support this moving forward
This package as amended.
as
Okay.
amended?
Maybe given the last vote, we can just do a hand vote instead of.
Yes, we can do,
roll call.
all right.
All those in favor of the proposal as amended, please raise your hands. And from the virtual world,
Let's just get everybody. I've got, okay, everybody I see. Yeah, and Alfred, can you just do a thumbs up or? Thanks, Denise. I got you too. Jacob, are you still there? Are you? Yeah, oh, that's a thumbs up. Alfred.
Wave.
Okay, gotta be careful with that.
Okay, I think we've got everybody and everybody in the room was hands up.
There's one hand up online, Rob.
Rob Curry has a question.
Rob, do you have a question? Or was that a thumbs up? And we're
That was
just-
a thumbs up.
Thank you, Rob.
Okay,
All right.
thank you all.
There's no middle finger.
Thank you for that. All right. I have to now stop.
Is there other business to come before the MPO?
Did it pass or fail?
It passed.
It's passed.
Not seeing any requests for other business discussions. Could I have a motion to adjourn the MPO, please?
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second? All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed? Okay, the motion more than passes. I'd now like to call to order Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. We'll do a twofer again. Could I have a motion for the action on the minutes of May 24th?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any corrections or omissions? And at the same time, we'll include on that the roll call. All those in favor? Sylvia, do you want to do a roll call?
Yes, Charlie Bedford,
Here and abstain.
Bill,
Present and abstain.
Barbara Salvatore.
Karen,
Okay. Al Candia,
Yes.
Andrew Chester,
Present, yes.
Deb Chester,
Yes, yes.
Jeff Moulton Derry,
Karen, yes.
Richard Derry,
Karen, yes.
Alfred Francistown.
Karen, yes.
Thank you. Linda Francistown.
Linda here.
Thank you. People are getting snacks. Gary Francistown. Just that, I think you said here and
I think he
Here
probably,
and abstain.
thank you. Yeah, you just have to remember to unmute yourself. Goffstown Barbara.
here abstained.
Thank you. Dave.
Yes, here.
Thank you. Jacob.
Karen, yes.
Thank you. Uxit Denise.
Present, yes.
Thank you, Denise. Rob.
Here and yes.
Londonderry Deb.
Present and yes.
Arthur.
I am here and yes.
Martin.
Here and yes.
Thank you. Lynn.
I'm here and yes.
Okay. Manchester Peter.
Here and abstain.
Ray.
Here and yes.
Dan.
Here and abstain.
Donald.
Here and abstain.
Mark in New Boston.
Here and yes.
Wyndham, we have Peter.
Hearing, yes.
John Hiltz.
Here and abstain.
And Edgar Lapointe.
Here and abstain.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. First item under new business, New Hampshire drinking water. Sylvia, would you like to introduce the representative from New Hampshire DES?
Yes, we have, Amy, are you there? Amy Rousseau?
I am here, yes.
And I am going to now, let's move. How did that happen? Oh, there's Amy. There's Amy. We're gonna make you a co-host. Will you be the only one, Amy, that is going to present today, or also Jeff?
Jeff is going to present, but I am going to share my screen and advance slides for him.
Oh, all right. I don't have to make Jeff. All right. Well, we welcome Amy and Jeff. This is sort of a round two, if you will, of our emphasis on water. And I'm going to move the screen back to the full group. So I don't want to spend any time chatting. So take it away, Amy.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to come back. PFAS is a very broad topic. We could talk about it for hours. And I thought the 9 minutes I was left with by my coworker Aaron last meeting wasn't enough to give you enough information. So we will keep this brief today at very high level, but and we want to be able to answer any questions that you have. So I did bring Jeff in to speak with you today on St. Gobain. He is the Hazardous Waste Remediation Bureau Administrator, but has been the project manager on that project for, gosh, I think 4 years, maybe longer. And so he would be able to answer some of your questions better than I, and to give you some information on that. And so I wanted to start. For those of you who may not know what PFAS is, typically I skip this because most of us already know, but it's a family of man-made chemicals that are resistant to grease and oil, water. They're typically used for fabrics as a coating on fabrics and carpets. You see them in our everyday life in cosmetics and food packaging, and they are well known to be used by fire departments for fighting fires. They are persistent in the environment, and they're ubiquitous. They're pretty much everywhere. But on the bottom here, you'll see I added the ITRC information. They have a document, well-written and very informative on PFAS, probably more information than you ever really wanted to know, but it's there for your reference. There is a link there. And I have provided these slides to Sylvia so that she can share them with all of you, and you all have the various links that Jeff and I have put throughout the presentation. So I wanted to start by showing you the occurrence of PFAS in New Hampshire as we know it to date. So the DES has been sampling drinking water wells probably for 4 or 5 years now, maybe even 6, as well as any third parties or responsible parties as well. So what we show on this map are what we know for samples. So PFAS, we made MCLs back in July of 2020. MCLs are maximum contaminant levels, and they are also the ambient groundwater quality standards that we use here in New Hampshire. So you'll see PFOA is at 12 parts per trillion, PFOS is at 15 parts per trillion, PFHXS is at 18 parts per trillion, and then we have PFNA at 11 parts per trillion. So we regulate these 4 PFAS compounds all separate from each other and not combined. So you'll see on the left there, this is our mapper. You'll see a lot of green dots on this map. What the green dots mean, and this is going to be the same as we go through all the different maps I'm going to show you, is that those occurrences are below our AGQSs that you see here in the table. The orange or yellowish dots are above these standards, and then the red dots are above the 70 parts per trillion, which was the EPA's health advisory up until a couple of weeks ago. So this mapper is available to everybody. It is on our website. I put the link here at the bottom. The public can access this, pop in their address, and really hone in on what's going on in their area. So I did this here. I spread it out, honed in on Southern New Hampshire on the Planning Commission's region, so you can kind of get a better idea of the occurrence within your region here. And you'll see that you'll start to see more of a concentration of exceedances down in the Bedford and Londonderry area and over in Wyndham. And then there are some occurrences up there in Hooksett. So I also wanted to mention here that we are still testing wells today, and this is open to the public. And so if anyone wanted to request sampling within your Planning Commission area, I put the link here at the bottom, but they can go on and request that the DES come out and sample their well for PFAS. We are targeting our sampling right now to areas of concern and following any exceedances that we have. But I do encourage people to still, if they want their well sampled, to get on the list, and someone here from DES will respond to them as to whether we could do that immediately or if they'll be put more on a waiting list for a later time. So I wanted to hone down a little bit even more. What you're going to see here is a pink shaded area on this map. This is the 2018 consent decree area for St. Gobain. And then you're going to start to see that these yellow and red dots are really showing a little more clearly, and the green is starting to dissipate a little bit. So the occurrence in these areas, and I believe in your area, it's mostly Bedford up here, Londonderry over here, and then up here, I believe, is Manchester. So you'll see there is a greater concentration of PFAS exceedances in this area. And like I said, Jeff is going to speak more to St. Gobain and can give you some more information as we go along. But I did link on this page the original 2018 consent decree, if anyone is interested in reviewing that. All right. So then I honed in even a little bit farther so that these dots are starting to open up a little bit more for you. Over here on the left, you're going to see Bedford. You will see there are exceedances within the consent decree area, but you will also start to see exceedances outside the consent decree area as well. And we are still actively sampling in Bedford at this time, as well as Londonderry. And Londonderry you will see over here on the right. And you'll see the same occurrence happening where there's exceedances inside the consent decree and outside the consent decree area. And so just recently, and these are the two links that are on the bottom of this slide, Saint-Gobain has made a determination as to how they are going to deal with those exceedances inside the consent decree area, whether these residences get a point of entry treatment system versus being connected to water mains. And so an agreement came out in April of 2022, and then the second agreement just became public 2 days ago, and that is on our blog on our website, but I put a link to it here for you as well. And Jeff can speak more to these two documents if you have questions about those. And then I also did want to address Wyndham because there have been some occurrences within Wyndham as well. I believe that these are mainly contributed to the fire department, but what I wanted to show here was that Saint-Gobain does take up a large area of southern New Hampshire and a lot of the exceedances, but there are also other sources of PFAS within the state and within your planning region that are not contributed to Saint-Gobain. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff so he can talk to you about Saint-Gobain and some other things. So Jeff, if you want to go ahead and take it away. And just let me know when you want me to advance the slides.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Amy, for that introduction and overview of what we're seeing for PFAS and groundwater. I want to take a different tact and try and explain some of what we're seeing. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the Saint-Gobain factory located in Merrimack, New Hampshire, on the northern side of Merrimack, just between the Everett Turnpike and the Merrimack River, but they have a coating facility that coats fabric with various types of coating. And the chemical dispersions or mixtures of chemicals contain PFAS that they typically use at their facility, which began operation as a different company called ChemFab in the 1980s and continued today as Saint-Gobain took them over in the early 2000s. But essentially their process involves dipping fabric into these dispersions, and then the fabric goes up through vertically oriented ovens where the fabric is heated, and some of those chemicals are evaporated and driven off through the smokestacks. And the air emissions included PFAS, and they're carried with the air currents and deposited on the ground as either wet or dry deposition. So when it's not raining, it's dry deposition. When it rains, it's wet deposition. But subsequent rain events leach that PFAS that's deposited on the ground through the soil column, eventually reaching the groundwater table where it can be drawn into water supply wells. Next slide, Amy. So recognizing that there was a problem with the deposition of PFAS from Saint-Gobain, there was a rule passed that allowed the state to enforce or require permitting of air controls to abate the PFAS in the emissions. And as part of that permitting process, Saint-Gobain had to install what we call a regenerative thermal oxidizer, which essentially heats up the emissions to break the carbon fluorine bond and destroy some of the PFAS. So here's some photos that, next slide, Amy. So if you recall from the maps that Amy showed previously, there's a lot of complexity in the groundwater results for PFAS. And in the Saint-Gobain area, the main PFAS is plural for a number of different chemicals, and PFOA is an individual PFAS compound. And PFOA is probably the most prevalent compound exceeding state standards due to the emissions from Saint-Gobain. And we see a lot of variability in the groundwater from well to well, where one well could be below standard and neighboring wells over the standard. And this is really a function of several different factors, including differences in the air deposition. Closer to the facility, there was a greater amount of PFAS deposited on the ground surface. Topography and wind currents, localized wind currents can influence the amount of air deposition. Also, we find that the superficial geology plays a role in how the PFAS percolate down through the soil and the unconsolidated sediments, ultimately making their way to wells. And the bedrock geology can play a factor. There's different cracks in the rocks, and how water flows from the surface through those cracks to an individual well can influence the concentration of PFAS. And finally, another factor are time-related factors such as changes in the chemicals released over time, precursor transformations or transformation of chemicals from a bigger molecule down to PFOA that we regulate, and also seasonal variations, so differences in the amount of rainfall and infiltration throughout the year. And I think together all these factors result in some of the complex map patterns that we see in the towns in your planning region. Next slide, Amy. So here's just a three-dimensional representation of some wells. The two on the left are bedrock wells. The rock is gray, and water in a bedrock well comes from cracks in the rocks, like on the photo on the left-hand side of this image. And the cracks can have different plumbing. Some can be deep fractures with really old groundwater that could be decades old, and there could be shallow fractures with water that recharged, days to weeks to months ago. And I think differences in the amount of soil cover over the rock plays a role in some of the concentrations of PFAS that we're seeing, coupled with the complexity of these cracks in the rocks. And this is really gets to the heart of why you can see one well that's over standard next door to a well that's below standard. Next slide, Amy. So Amy mentioned that we recently came to an agreement, DES came to an agreement with St. Cobain on a remedy for contaminated wells. As of last count, there was approximately 960 wells above our state standards inside the consent decree area that Amy showed on a previous slide. And the proposal from St. Cobain had two parts. One was the agreement that we reached that had specific remedies for about 33% of those 960 wells. And those remedies included connection to existing water lines, properties that would be connected to new water lines that were extended down through the streets. And then about 181 of those properties were going to receive what we call a point of entry treatment system that typically consists of tanks of granular activated carbon installed in the basement near where the water comes into a house from the individual well. And as part of the initial agreement that was signed in April, St. Cobain had to propose a remedy for the remaining 67% of wells that exceeded standards. And we received that on April 29th. And that is the document that was just made public in June. And this includes a combination of POET, point of entry treatment systems, and waterline connections. So, kind of follows on with your initial agreement. But basically what this agreement allows for is St. Cobain to move forward and remedy the 960 plus wells that are over standard. And it's important to point out that some sampling is still ongoing in several of the towns to test wells that haven't yet been tested before. And St. Cobain is submitting a document to DES that's going to propose ongoing sampling and establishment of a groundwater management zone, which will make sure that properties that are currently below standard don't exceed standard in the future. So that's something we're expecting to be forthcoming. Next slide, Amy. And I think that's all I had. So that's back to you. Oh, you're on mute, Amy.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. So last meeting, Aaron talked big picture about some of the things being planned for Southern New Hampshire and water main extensions when it comes to PFAS. And so I wanted to address some more PFAS specific funding that we have available that probably can help a lot of the private well users in your areas as well as community water systems. So let's start with this. So right now there's 4 PFAS specific funding programs that we have that I administer. And so the first one, which this is good timing because I wasn't able to talk about this a month ago, but now we can. So the PFAS removal rebate program for private wells, we've just been approved funding through Governor and Executive Council and the Fiscal Committee. And so we are working to stand this rebate program up by the end of summer. And what this is that a private well owner can install treatment for PFAS exceedances and then come in for a rebate for up to $5,000 for treatment per household, or up to $10,000 if they have the opportunity to do a service connection. So meaning that there is already a water main in front of their home and they simply just need to connect in. There is that incentive for them to do that rather than keeping their contaminated well and treating it and then having to do operation and maintenance of that treatment in the future. And so, like I said, I put the link here for you. This is a program that is coming up soon. We are working very hard to get this live and accepting applications. And then I'll move over to the PFAS remediation grant and loan fund. I'm actually going to go into some more detail as we move down so that we can get to the other slides. And then there's the PFAS consolidation study program, and then the PFAS treatment design services reimbursement. So I already started a little bit with the rebate program. So like I said, this is up to $5,000 for households, up to $10,000 for a service connection. All of these programs have one thing in common, is that to be eligible, you need to have an exceedance of one of the 4 AGQS that I showed earlier. It doesn't have to be all 4, it just needs to be one, but it does have to be an exceedance. The nice thing about this rebate program is that we made it retroactive back to September 30th, 2019, when the AGQS originally were adopted, so that anyone who already has installed treatment are eligible to come in and get a rebate for that. So another reason that we did that is we don't want to stop anybody today from treating their water and having safe drinking water. So until the program is live, someone could still install treatment today and still be eligible for the rebate program moving forward. So then the PFAS remediation grant and loan fund, this one, we currently have $75 million right now to give away. There is another 25 million pending under House Bill 1547. We are waiting for the governor to sign that, and then that will add another 25 million. So with this 25 million, we are allowed to extend the rebate program as well. They are adding the rebate program to the statute of this program, so that will be able to help additional private well users with this money. So the way this breaks down is 50 million of this money is for low interest loans. That was the original program 2 years ago, established in statute RSA 485-H. Last year, the statute was amended to include grants to the program, and the RLF, as we call it, got $25 million in ARPA money to extend grants as well. So, and the grant is 1.5 million or 30% of the total project cost, whichever is greater. And so this fund covers 100% costs for PFAS remediation. And the eligibility for this program includes registered community public water systems, non-transient, non-community public water systems that are not for profit. So these are mostly going to be schools and a limited amount of childcare centers that would be eligible to come in for this. And then last year we added municipalities to be eligible entities. So this means towns can apply to extend water or treatment themselves to private well users within their communities. So that was a big one that got added last year. And I don't believe that there's a lot of community or municipalities right now that know that they can apply to this. So, so this is something to keep in mind if your community has a PFAS issue and would like to address it. So I know like the town of Bedford is utilizing this program. And I believe that might be the only one within your planning area right now. So again, you need the exceedance here for eligibility. You do have to demonstrate that the remedy is the most cost effective. And then we do take into consideration the responsible or third party piece of this. So if there is someone that has been deemed responsible, they do need to put in their fair share of the cost prior to coming to the program. But we factor that all in, and we look at that during eligibility. And we work with the Hazardous Waste Remediation Bureau here to determine whether there has been a third party designated yet or not. The other thing to know about this, though, is that you can be the responsible party and still apply if there is no negligence shown. So there are many fire departments around the state that are utilizing this program to help install treatment in private well users that have been affected from the contamination from their fire departments. And this is also a retroactive program that goes back to September 30th, 2019 for the loan money. The ARPA grant money has other restrictions put on it. So that particular program, we can only retroactive back to March 3rd of 2021, unfortunately. So now I'm going to shift over to this Consolidation Study Assistance Program. So this came out of a program that Aaron had mentioned last meeting from the Drinking Water Groundwater Trust Fund, where they set up a Consolidation Study Assistance Program, but many of the applicants were PFAS focused. And so I had some additional money in another fund, and we decided to split to two programs so that we could use that money specifically for PFAS. So this is 100% reimbursement where a community or a non-transient, non-community, or even a municipality can come in and ask for a grant to do a consolidation study to look at their options of what's the most cost-effective way to treat PFAS in drinking water. So whether that be installing, treatment for so many private well users, or extending a water main to these users. So this is there for them. Again, these sources have to have an exceedance of the PFAS AGQS. And this program, like the other two I've already talked about, are first come, first serve. So we review all of the applications as we receive them. So we encourage people to act quickly if they can, so that they don't miss out on these opportunities. And then there's the PFAS Treatment Design Services Program. So this one hones more down onto those that aren't eligible for our other programs. So our transient and non-transient public water systems are eligible for this, as well as all schools and all child care centers. So they don't have to be a public water system. If they're a school or a child care, they're eligible. So this particular program is just for the design of treatment. And so we did a study a few years back to determine what percentage of a vendor's cost we could contribute to design, because when a vendor does their cost, they don't necessarily break out their design costs specifically. It's all lumped in. And so it was determined that 26% of the total cost of most projects can be contributed to design. So these particular entities can come in if they're going to install treatment and get 26% of that back. So again, this is first come, first serve as well, and get reviewed as I receive them. So those are the 4 PFAS specific funding programs that are out there for people that are affected. There is other available funding. It's not PFAS specific, but it still can be used for PFAS contamination. And so there's actually 2 new coming out, federal emerging contaminant funding. So the first one comes out of the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and that one is going to be linked to the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, and it's an emerging contaminant fund. So that is not necessarily just PFAS. I believe that the state of New Hampshire is also going to allow manganese to be addressed under this particular pot of money as well. So that is going to be run through the state revolving fund program. So the eligibility requirements will be the same, meaning it's a community public water system or a non-transient, non-community, non-profit water system. And then the other federal funding that's coming out is from the Water Infrastructure Improvements for the Nation, which is shortened as WIN. So you'll hear WIN a lot. So this one actually is a little bit more PFAS specific. It's for small and underserved communities for PFAS. It's a grant program. So this is for disadvantaged communities. And right now the state is working to rewrite their definition of disadvantaged to include contamination so that it's not all financial based. So if a water system were to have PFAS contamination, then they would fit the definition of a disadvantaged community and would be eligible for this WIN. These two programs, we are still getting information from the government on, so that we have not stood these up yet. So these are upcoming in the future. We anticipate that these are going to enhance the PFAS remediation grant and loan fund that is already in place. And we are going to work internally to figure out how to best serve applicants with all three of these programs for PFAS funding. I mentioned the Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund. So that fund on its own without this new money coming in can also be applied to for PFAS work. And then there's the Drinking Water and Groundwater Trust Fund that Aaron spoke to in the last meeting last month. So my take home from this is there's a lot of money right now flying around, and the easiest way to try and figure out what you may be eligible for or what your constituents may be eligible for is to call me. And then we can talk through the particular situation and what you're eligible for and how we can maximize all the different programs to get the best funding package. So my contact information is here. As PFAS response administrator, I am also the point of contact for PFAS here at the DES. So you don't only need to call me for funding. If there's any PFAS issues, I am the point of contact. And if I can't answer your question, then I can direct you to who can, like directing you to Jeff. So there's a very quick overview of PFAS in Southern New Hampshire, but if there are any questions, Jeff and I are here to answer them.
Any quick questions for you? Yes, please go ahead.
You used the term several times in the presentation. It was transient and non-transient. Could you explain that?
Yes, so I'll go through all three for you. So a community water system is one where it's 25 or more people or 15 or more service connections where people use the water 6 months or more out of the year. So basically they live there. That's their home. That's where they get most of their water. A non-transient, non-community water system is a place where people are, the 25 or more people are using the water 6 months or more of the year, but it's not their primary residence. So it's going to be your workplaces, schools, things like that, childcare centers. Those are your non-transients. A transient water system is one like a campground, a restaurant, where you come and go, but you're not exposed to the water greater than 60 days out of the year. So those are the three different types of water systems that the DES regulates.
You had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is pretty specific. I live in Bedford within the Senko domain contamination area. My home has been tested twice, last time 2 years ago. Fortunately, we've been negative, but homes around us have been positive, particularly homes slightly higher up on the elevation up on the hill. My question is, number one, can I be retested again? And number two, should we be concerned?
Thanks. So those are good questions. I think, there's variety, as I showed on one of my slides with the hydrogeology, how water moves from well to well. I think it's encouraging that you had 2 tests that were below our current standards. As part of the groundwater management permitting, which I very briefly touched on, but that's something we requested that St. Cobain apply for a groundwater management permit. And basically what that does is establish a zone where there's known groundwater contamination. And then under the permitting process, there are requirements that there has to be ongoing testing to make sure wells such as yours don't exceed standards in the future. So I'm expecting that permit application in the next month or two from Saint-Gobain, and that should have a proposal for how they would expect to monitor wells to verify that they don't exceed standards in the future.
Are there any other questions from commissioners in the room? Are there any questions from commissioners that are calling in? Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Great presentation.
Nate, do you want to do the budget?
Yes. So I do recognize that we're in overtime here, so I'll try to be as efficient as possible in walking through the budget. Can everybody see this presentation
Yes.
online?
Yes.
Maybe, okay. I will be quick as possible in going through this. I appreciate everybody's time, and I know we are running a bit late tonight. The budget, the draft fiscal year 2023 budget was included in your packets for review prior to this meeting. I'll walk through some of the highlights. Our budget and executive committees have been working with us on developing the budget for the past few months. Revenues are anticipated to increase by 15.64% in the coming year. And similarly, expenses are anticipated to increase by essentially that same amount. We do have a balanced budget here. On the big picture, we've got some significant new projects that started in fiscal year 22, those being the Regional Housing Needs Assessment and the Pathways to Play program. More recently, we have been awarded an EPA Brownfields Assessment Grant, which will begin shortly, just in the next couple of weeks. And that will continue for, I think, a period of 3 years, starting in fiscal year 2023. With this additional work, we do need some additional staffing capacity to be able to accommodate and accomplish the work that is on our program for fiscal 23. So we do have budgeted for staffing increase to a total of 13 staff people. That includes the addition of a new assistant planner and a new regional mobility manager position that is directly funded through Section 5310 funding that's coming in from New Hampshire DOT. We've also seen some health insurance cost changes and some additional staff that will be joining the health insurance program. On the revenue side, as it relates to municipal dues and local contracts, the commission set a fiscal 23 dues rate of 67.6 cents per capita. That was done back at the October 26, 2021 meeting. And this is the third consecutive year that we've held the dues rate level. We do adjust the dues this year to tie out to the most current available population figures, which are the 2020 US Census figures. We have some new local projects that involve assisting the town of Deerfield with an update to their master plan, as well as Sylvia has been assisting the town of Londonderry with circuit rider planning services. And that should conclude later in July. On the state and federal revenue side, our CTAP Phase 3 project, for which we've been working with our colleagues at Central New Hampshire Planning Commission on the Commute Smart program, was completed during fiscal year 2022. So that project has come to its conclusion. Our staff continues to assist the town of Chester with an update to their source water protection plan. Cam Prohlman in our office has been working on that project. The Regional Housing Needs Assessment project will continue into fiscal year 2023. As I mentioned briefly before, New Hampshire DOT has provided supplemental federal Section 5310 funding to each region to support the hiring of a full-time regional mobility manager. And this is a position that will work directly with our our transit providers and human service transportation providers to coordinate their services. So they'll be working directly with MTA and Easter Seals and Rockingham Nutrition Meals on Wheels and the other providers in the region. We are entering the second year of our 2-year UPWP Unified Planning Work Program contract, which is our master contract with New Hampshire DOT and our largest single funding source. So we're in the kind of the mid-contract period there. We're also entering the second year of our current 2-year targeted block grant agreement with what is now the New Hampshire Department of Business and Economic Affairs. That contract used to be with the Office of Energy and Planning. That agency has now been rolled into the Department of Business and Economic Affairs. We're also, James Bayo in our office will be working on a new project with New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority to do what's called tools and techniques research related to accessory dwelling units. That project just started and will continue into fiscal year 23. Other revenues, we do anticipate that the commission will receive a $3,000 outreach contribution from AARP in fiscal year 23. AARP has supported the efforts of the commission for a number of years now, and we expect that support will continue next year. No change is anticipated for our first floor tenant or rental income. So we do anticipate that our tenant, the Holy Cross Family Learning Center on the first floor of this building, will be our tenant throughout fiscal year 2023 with no change. And the Regional Pathways to Play program, which started in fiscal year 2022 and is funded by the New Hampshire Children's Health Foundation, will continue throughout fiscal year 2023. On the expense side, overall salary and benefit costs are up 26.68% from the current budget. That is because of the increase in staffing for the assistant planner and regional mobility manager position, as well as with the current inflationary environment everybody is dealing with. Obviously, our budget includes cost of living adjustments at 7% this year, and that keeps us close to the current inflation rate. I think current inflation is about 8.6% nationally at the moment. Health insurance costs, as I mentioned, are increasing in fiscal year 2023, and additional staff will be joining the plan. On the consultants and contractors side of our expense portion of the budget, we have issued a request for qualifications for engineering services. That will be a 2-year contract totaling $90,000 that will be reimbursed through our Unified Planning Work Program. We use engineering services to help scope and provide cost estimates for the projects that we propose for inclusion in the 10-year plan. And we also utilize that engineering assistance for help in maintaining our regional travel demand model. We also, with our new EPA Brownfields Assessment Grant, will be issuing in the coming months a solicitation for consulting services for evaluation of those contaminated properties that get considered in the Brownfields Assessment Program. Professional service and operating expenses, our external audit costs will be increasing in fiscal 23. That's because actuarial services are required. We must do actuarial analysis every 2 years as we are a participant in New Hampshire retirement system. We must do an actuarial analysis to quantify the commission's proportional share of the New Hampshire retirement system's medical subsidy liability. So that is we have to hire an actuary, and it's a very technical work, but it is required as part of our audit process. Computer and software costs are increasing due to pricing increases by the software vendors themselves, as well as the addition of new staff. We must make sure that those new staff have good functioning computers and available software to them. The budgeted amounts that we have for in-person meetings, travel, and conferences and workshops, we are assuming basically those are returning to pre-pandemic levels. Largely will be in-person workshops and conferences, and back to travel kind of on a pre-pandemic basis. So we have budgeted accordingly. An in-person annual meeting, also based on discussion with our executive committee, an in-person annual meeting has been budgeted in the unallowed indirect costs item. So,
Hooray, hooray.
yes. Just kind of wrapping up, big picture, we did have back in the fiscal 17-18 period, we had a period of capital investments where we put solar panels on the building and had a number of retirement expenses incurred. Since then, the past 4 years have been positive years for the commission. The fund balance remains in a strong position, and over the past couple of months, we have been working with our budget and executive committees to update our reserve targets, and we've been deploying our fund balance into a series of 4 strategic reserves to address the commission's future needs, those being an operating reserve, an infrastructure reserve, which is essentially everything with the buildings and grounds, as well as key IT components, accrued benefit liability reserve, and a vehicle replacement reserve for the time when our commission's vehicle reaches the end of its useful life. So we have been very diligent, and we're fortunate that the commission is in the sound financial position that it is. And that's kind of a brief overview of the highlights of the budget. I tried to do that fairly quickly, recognizing everybody's time, but I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any. And I will stop sharing.
Questions for Nate? In-house? Yes, Peter.
Nate, and I appreciate that was an excellent, quick job.
Thank you.
Well done. I just noticed a 15% increase in both revenues and expenses, your balance, which is terrific.
Yep.
My question is just looking ahead, since you're adding 2 staffers, looking ahead to the next fiscal year. Do you expect to have revenues adequate to cover in that fiscal year?
We do. As it relates to the increase in Section 5310 funding and the hiring of a regional mobility manager to do that, we originally sought to do those services through a consulting arrangement. Ultimately, it was difficult to find a consultant that had that portfolio of options. We put an RFP out unsuccessfully, unfortunately. So we decided to hire a staff person to do that. We've advertised it as a permanent full-time position with some level of expectation that Section 5310 funding will continue at that level in the future. That is a little bit of a leap of faith on our part, but we have every reason to believe, based on the IIJA funding levels, that New Hampshire DOT will continue to fund the regions with that level of Section 5310 funding in the future. Beyond that, there is additional funding in the IIJA in future years, which should be reflected in our next Unified Planning Work Program. So when we're negotiating our fiscal 24 and 25 Unified Planning Work Program, there is additional federal PL funding that supports that, which we would expect to see. The only kind of question mark that we have looking into the future, and we're not going to really have clarity on this until probably into the fall, is how the census urbanized area boundaries are drawn. And if the Concord area becomes part of an urbanized area, then our colleagues at the Central New Hampshire Planning Commission will become an MPO, and that will change the formula for how the PL funds are distributed. But at this point, we're cautiously optimistic based on the levels of funding in the IIJA that those positions.
Right there. And any questions from people calling in? Thank you all. Thank you, Nate. We're not done yet. What a great way to close out a meeting is to welcome appreciation, or acknowledge appreciation.
We need a vote.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Excuse me. I'd like to move the adoption of the fiscal year.
I'm sorry, my apologies. Excuse me.
Adoption of the fiscal year 23 budget as presented.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
All those in favor, please raise your hands. All those opposed? All those abstaining? Okay.
First meeting, I don't want to overstep things here.
Gary.
I loved it, though. I had a great presentation.
Oh, thank you very much, Gary.
It's in the affirmative. Okay, as I started to say, an appreciation of 2 retiring commissioners. First, Martin Shujas from Londonderry has been a commissioner since 2011. And Barbara Salvatore from Bedford has been with us since 2014. Thank you so much for your due diligence and your support of the commission, and we wish you well. And is there a motion to adjourn? Oh,
Barbara
excuse me.
wants to say something.
Yes, Barbara.
I just want to thank everyone for the opportunity to serve with you. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you, Barbara.
Any commissioner insights? You were insightful all through the meeting. I can see why you're quiet. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Is there a second? All those in favor, voice vote.
Hey.
Aye.